scientists.
Welcome to Climate Channel, Climate Conversation with Quamrul Chowdhury, episode 53rd on Outcome of Glasgow COP26. You all know that COP26, Glasgow Climate Conference, has done and dusted. What is the outcome? How far we met the expectations of the global community, the expectation of billions of people around the globe? We are now trying to have our reflections. Not ringside reflection, inside the ring reflection, especially when Franz Perrez, the lead negotiator, the chair of Environmental Integrity Group led by Switzerland, is here, and Tony Crooks and Cathy. Cathy is from the Yango. So the younger generation, what was their expectation prior to this conference of parties, COP26 in Glasgow, and what outcome we have had in Glasgow at the last moment on the night of 13th November. After one day, extra day, work, hardens, lot of hardens. But all said and done, we have had Glasgow Climate Fact. How ambitious this fact is, we would like to hear first from Franz Perrez, Ambassador Franz Perrez from Switzerland, CRO. Yes, your take, your reflection.
Thank you very much, Quamrul. It's always a pleasure to have these exchanges with you and to think together a little bit about the negotiation process with a little bit more distance than when we are just sitting together and running from one negotiation room to the other. And it's interesting really to look back now with a little distance to the COP and to make assessment how successful it was with the Glasgow Climate Pact, but also look at all the decisions together. And for us, I think we had on the discussion prior to the COP, for us as Switzerland, but also for me and for the AG, there were basically 3 areas and 3 criteria for success for the COP. And that was rules, ambition, and finance. We had hoped that the COP will adopt robust rules on transparency, on markets, on common timeframes. They will also adopt a set of decisions that helps us to keep 1.5 degree in reach. And thirdly, also finance, that we launch a process, a forward-looking, solution-oriented process to develop together a good new finance target for the time post-2025 that will really have a positive impact on the ground. And our impression is really that the COP did deliver on all of these 3 areas. Let me just highlight a few of them, and then in the discussion I come back to them later again. I think on the rules, we were able to adopt transparency rules that are robust, that really require a good reporting, and that foresee flexibility for those countries who need flexibility in the light of their capacity. And finally, also capacity support is provided in the decisions adopted in Glasgow. And that's exactly the kind of rules that we need in order to make sure that the Paris approach functions. The Paris approach that invites countries to submit nationally determined contributions, which are not legally binding as such, but the transparency, a robust transparency scheme will ensure that countries make everything to achieve the targets that they have formulated. So I would say a very good outcome on transparency. Also markets. On markets, you have an excellent outcomes that really prevents double counting between entities, that prevents double counting between entities on the one side and international mitigation systems like CORSIA or systems that could be developed in the context of maritime navigations. Double count is excluded there as well. And in addition to that, we also create for the first time certificates For other purposes, for the private market, that will include corresponding adjustment and therefore also prevent double counting or double claiming between private market and NDC. So also there we think a really very good outcome. The pill that we have to accept, not as positive outcome with regard to markets, certainly is a big carryover that we have to accept. But at the same time, we also know that the demand for that carryover will be very limited. So far, no country has announced it has an interest in this carryover. Several countries have announced, like Switzerland or Japan, that they will not buy such units from the carryover. And the third area of rules, that's a common time frames, where I think we also are able to agree on a good outcome, a call to all countries to use in future 5-year time frames for the NDCs. And I think that is also the most positive outcome that we could expect, because we knew that the legally binding decision will not be possible. So a very good outcome on rules. And let us remind, rules, that's the core business of the COPs. And I think there the COP was really very successful. But also on ambition, with the Glasgow Climate Pact, we were adopting a decision now looking at mitigation, inviting or calling countries to revisit their indices with aspiration to increase them, inviting and urging countries to submit long-term strategies, establishing a working plan on 2030 ambitions, organizing ministerial meetings to look at these 2030 ambitions, and even mentioning coal for the first time as something that we have to phase down, not phase out, but phase down, which is the first step towards a phase out. And that's a very positive outcome. On ambition, we were launching a 2-year process to look closer what has to be done in order to put into operation the global goal adaptation. We are agreeing on a doubling of adaptation support. And we are also launching a process to look more on loss and damages. So there I think also that that Glasgow Climate Pact is really a positive and ambitious outcome. And on finance, in addition to agreeing on a doubling of the adaptation finance, I think we were able to set up a process that is robust to develop a new goal on climate finance for post-2025, which will be really critical. It will not be a number that will just be presented from nobody knows where it's coming from. It will be a goal that we are able to develop together with the objective to make sure that this new finance globe will help implementation on the ground and will help us also to make sure that we are achieving the 1.5-degree objective. So in a nutshell, in a summary, I would say it was a very successful COP. It was a COP that helped out through its decision on rules, through its decision on transparency, and through its decisions on finance to keep 1.5 degree in reach. And that was at the end the main objective of the COP, and I think we were able to deliver on that.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Franz Perrez, for setting the tone of this climate conversation episode 55 on the outcome of just lasted COP26 in Glasgow. It was not a failed COP. It had delivered, at least on a couple of counts, fronts, as Ambassador Franz Perrez flagged at the outset. I would now like to request Cathy. Cathy, you are from younger generation. You are there. You made also very passionate statement at the closing and also at the opening. So, what is your take, Cathy?
Yeah, thanks, Quamrul. And unlike Franz, I'm not a real ambassador. So I'm one of the ones that green ambassadors of COP appointed by the UK presidency, but certainly not a real one. And I guess some of you may know me from following UNFCCC processes from a gender and youth perspectives. And I guess similar to Franz, I guess everyone was just running around the whole time between negotiations. And then for me, it's between negotiations, events. And yeah, I think probably two areas. One is finance. Of course, I guess everyone had such high hope on finance. Although, if my memory is correct, there are 19 agenda items this year. So I think it's pretty much a mission impossible for anyone. But yeah, I know that everyone worked super hard for it, and yeah, made some progress, especially on adaptation. But this year, because I usually follow finance, technology, capacity building, and more. But this year, I was mainly following technology, also because it's very important for youth, women, and indigenous peoples, because our three constituencies were trying to get seats at the CTCN advisory board. And I guess you all know the results as we got the COP decision. So indeed, it's very exciting that this would be the first time that women and youth constituencies have a seat at a constituted body. And also, of course, with the support from many parties like EU, Norway, US, Chile, and many more, including EIG members like Mexico, who have been so supportive from the very beginning. And of course, on specifically finance for technology, it would be great to see, of course, more support from Annex 1 parties, and especially in terms of finance for CTCN. So it would be really great to see continuous support from parties like Switzerland, who's a very important donor for CTCN. Thanks.
Thank you. Hopefully, technology will also fly after Glasgow COP26, and whatever left, we can come back again in Sharm el Sheikh at COP27 next year, and next year in Dubai, UAE, COP28. So with that, I would now like to ask Tony Crooks, you are a wise man, have been on the ground for many months. So what is your take?
Well, thank you for inviting me.
What is your reflection?
Yeah, my job is group head of research and development for a company called AOC Global, and we undertake large projects in Africa, and I basically solve problems, sometimes for governments and sometimes for countries and sometimes for lots of people. The reason why I went to COP26, I actually was asked to go and speak to Masamba Thioye, who's the project executive of the UNFCCC, but I couldn't get in because of security. However, I did attend the Beyond the Green event, which was all about hemp and industrial hemp and CBD.
Solutions.
Yes.
You are for solutions.
Yes, definitely. And the reason why I was invited to speak there was because I've started a project which is called Climate Crisis Team, and that is about getting as many people as possible to grow as much industrial hemp as possible in as many places as possible in Africa. And if that was done to full capacity on the unused arable land, it would absorb 3.6 billion tons of CO2 in one crop. I know it's a vast area, 202 million hectares, but the hemp will absorb about 18 tons per hectare per crop, and you can do 2 crops a year. So this project, that's why I attended. And what Franz was saying before about coal and reducing the requirement for coal, then I understand from one of my colleagues in this project that they can make fuel bricks from hemp waste that is a similar energy density to coal, and which can be used as a direct replacement. Also, like in the UK, we have the Drax power station that uses a lot of wood pellets. Hemp can grow far 100 times faster than trees, and is completely renewable. So that could replace that, and then you keep the trees as well. And also, it's just an amazing thing, and that's like what my project is all about. That's what I went to COP for, yeah. And that's what I'm carrying on doing.
Thank you, Tony. I would now like to go to Vincent Paulo, Vice, our lead climate negotiator for C77 and China, who was deeply engaged to lead the 134 countries in climate negotiation on loss and damage, climate-induced loss and damage. He had worked quite relentlessly during all those days. So I would now like to ask him, what is, Vice, your reflection Your take.
Thank you. Thank you, Quamrul, and good to see other colleagues here. Franz, good afternoon. Hi. No, I think I set myself a pretty low bar when it came to COP26. I thought, well, it should not be Copenhagen, which is a very, very low bar indeed, you know. So I think by that standard, I would quite agree with Franz. We did see some progress. I think we moved a bit further in terms of the institutionalization of the regime for loss and damage. I think we moved forward a little bit in terms of how we would address the issues relating to the global goal on adaptation. We moved, I think, forward as well in terms of having a clearer understanding of what it means to achieve 1.5C, for example. So we had the references there to the 45% below 2010 by 2030. We have the reference to accelerating action in this decade. And we, also, I think, also did some progress in terms of the process towards identifying the new collective quantified goal. So small steps. And I think in the context of the process and in the context of the overall development of this multilateral policy regime for international cooperation, at this point in time, relatively small steps are what we can expect, because we are still, I think, very much right at the beginning of the implementation of the Paris Agreement, right? You know, even if it was negotiated 6 years ago, entered into force 5 years ago, the implementation of the NDCs are only starting this year. And so I think it will still take some time for us to figure out exactly how the nuts and bolts will really work. So I think the progress we had in Glasgow was, I think, you know, what could have been expected out of that process. Of course, there are some disappointments. I think, as you pointed out, we could have achieved a bit more in terms of climate finance. We should have been able to achieve a bit more in terms of, for example, technology transfer and having a greater clarity on both the finance flows to be expected within the next few years, especially next year on the $100 billion goal and on the technology transfer mechanism. But they're all part of the process that we're in. So I think, you know, in international cooperation, the metaphor I use is, in many ways, when you talk about climate change, despite the urgency of the situation, I think the system that we are in enables us only to progress by skipping rope, moving forward a little bit. You know, every now and then, skip rope and then move forward, skip rope and move forward. So a lot of action taking place. We do need to scale up the work so that we start running the steeplechase, you know, so that we run and then jump over the hurdles as fast as we can. And hopefully, eventually, we will get a situation where we start doing pole vaults, where we have either technology or massive amounts of international cooperation coming in so that we are able to jump over the hurdles much faster. So I think it's part of this slow movement of the process that we are in, that Glasgow represented. And it is my hope, as I think everybody else on this conversation is, that we are able to move much faster, not just on mitigation, but also on adaptation, on loss and damage, on finance and technology. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Vice, for your take. I would now like to come back to Franz Perrez again. Say, we couldn't define the definition of climate finance at this point. Hopefully, in Sharm el-Sheikh and Dubai, we are going to have a clear-cut climate finance definition, and also setting adaptation goal, global goal on adaptation. On that count, we just couldn't deliver so far. But hopefully, in our homework from now on, we can also have robust climate, not only finance goal, but also adaptation goal. Then also finance facility for climate-induced loss and damage, where we have to confront a lot of hurdles in the days ahead. But hopefully, with all the goodwill and intention, we are also going to have clear goal over there. So what is your take, Ambassador Franz?
Thanks, Quamrul. Before coming back to your question, let me just build on what both Cathy and Vincent have just been saying. I think I agree, and it's good that Cathy was indicating also that we made some important decisions on ACE, on gender, on engagement of stakeholders. That's also something that sometimes we do not acknowledge enough. Because at the end, these elements are also important to keep the pressure on to move forward. So that is also a certain important element from the outcome from Glasgow. And I would also agree with Vincent that these were perhaps small steps from a certain perspective which he took there in Glasgow. But this is a process of small steps, and it is important that we are taking these small steps, and some of these small steps are absolutely critical to be taken. And I would say at least one step was perhaps not very small, the one on Article 6 implementation rule, but we have also to be honest, it's a step that is taken too late. We should have adopted these Article 6 rules already in Katowice. But I think it was worth waiting, because in Katowice we would not have been able to agree on rules that prevent double counting. And in Madrid, again, we were not able to agree on rules that are robust enough and that meet the needs from everybody. And I think the text in many areas has really matured and has become more robust since Madrid. So while this step should have been taken much earlier, we think it was absolutely worth to wait these 2 or 3 more years now to take them. And I agree, of course, with your gents also, there are always some disappointments with regard to financing, but also with regard to other areas. But now coming specifically on your question, Quamrul, I think on financing, the most important decision I think taken in Glasgow was really that process that brings us hopefully to a robust post-2025 collective post-2025 collective finance target that will really make a difference. A goal that will not only be effective by making a difference on the ground, but also a goal that is addressing the needs, both the needs of the poor countries, but also the needs of the system as a whole, the needs of the climate change challenge as a whole, and also a goal that will also be equitable and that will also be accessible, because agreeing on big numbers and establishing big funds that are not accessible is also not something that will make a difference. But the process that was set up that allows technical work, that allows political engagement, that allows the bringing in of the different perspectives and experience and knowledge from the expertise from the stakeholders, I think that is a good process. And we really hope that it will bring us forward to be able to agree on a good goal. Quamrul was also, Vincent was also referring to the 100 billion goal, and I would share with him the disappointment that we have not been able to agree on it. I think the delivery plan that was presented prior to the COP certainly is a disappointment from a certain perspective, because it does not indicate that we meet the 100 billion this year or next year, but probably only in 2023. But while being disappointment, I would say it is at least honest. And that is something that is perhaps even more important, to have an honest plan than one thing that is promising something again, which then will not be kept. We had difficult discussions between donors, because there were some donors who wanted to make a promise that would have been more ambitious, and we were part of them. We always thought, this is now an issue of trust. If we make a promise that we can't keep again, that is an issue of trust. The 100 billion goal that came out of the blue, and it was formulated in the context of I think that we did not reach 100 billion is a disappointment, but I wouldn't see that as an issue of trust. But if now again we would make, with all the experience that we have in 100 billion goal, have formulated a delivery plan that we then not be able to deliver upon, that would really have been problematic. So we hope, of course, to overachieve it. We hope that we try to do everything to deliver earlier than that. That motivation is still here because that's for the benefit of all of us. But although being disappointed, I think it's also a good signal that it is an honest delivery plan. Then you were referring to the issue of global adaptation goals. They have launched a 2-year process, and we hope that this 2-year process will also be a robust one that allows us to take a constructive and solution-oriented approach of this discussion on global adaptation goal. We had a lot of discussions with colleagues from all around the world, of course, especially within the EIG. That includes developing countries, developed countries, countries from all the different regions, and also other partners. I think what we really have to avoid is a philosophical debate about a new goal. What we have to do is really we have a goal that is formulated in the Paris Agreement. We have some work done by the Adaptation Committee. What we really have to focus on, what do we need to make a difference on the ground? I think that has to be the main objective of this 2-year process. So it will not be Sharm el-Sheikh to deliver on that. It will be probably United Arab Emirates to deliver on that, the COP there. But we have really to make full use of that process. And the first thing to do is really to build on what has been decided in Glasgow and not to challenge and undo it. Many times in this climate process, after having agreed on something, then the first step by some parties was to try to reinterpret the decision in a different manner. We have to stay on with that decision and really try to use that time to find out what do we have to do together to help countries to meet the fundamental adaptation challenges that they are meeting. I think that is, we're looking forward to the process. Then on loss and damage, that will be another challenge, of course, to be looked at. And we hope also that the process that is initiated now will also be one that helps us to look beyond ideology and beyond traditional positions to look at what is really needed and also to different answers that are possible. I think loss and damage it is absolutely obvious. With the increase of the global temperature, the losses and damages, the costs of climate change will increase fundamentally. And the system, the UN system and the mechanism and the institutions that are in place as they are today are not sufficient to meet these challenges, these growing climate challenges. So we have to discuss together what is needed to be able to meet these challenges. But we have also have honest discussions who will have to contribute in order to meet these challenges. And there I think we have also to step beyond the traditional thinking. I think we take fundamental approach. This is a pollute the pays principle approach to be taken here. We think really to launch that discussion in a direction to say whoever is causing the problem of climate change has also to bear responsibility for that challenge and also to provide support from that. And that means, in other words, we clearly have to look beyond the traditional donor group. This is an issue that is going beyond that. This is not the reason, because this is not an argument in order to say that traditional donors should not continue to provide support and to increase their support. Not at all. Of course, they have to do so. But we have also clearly to bring on board in the support side those who bear a huge part of the responsibility and who also have capacity and the capabilities to provide support. So we also hope that this process will be someone that is beyond traditional ideology, but really hands-on, solution-oriented, bringing us to an outcome that makes sure that those who have the capacity, those who bear the responsibility, make everything that is possible to strengthen the institutions and the processes that are in place to also address loss and damages.
Thank you, Ambassador Franz Perrez, for your reflection and try to also guide us to not only Sharm el-Sheikh but also Dubai. We have in front of us a lot of homework because, as you said, to make an issue massive enough, we need a lot of conversation, a lot of homework, a lot of engagement, so that whatever we have had agreed on in one COP, we need to develop that further in 2-3 next ones. And so that is the process. That is as our pretty friends from UK who had been used to saying that the process is substance. Here we have to follow the process, but we need to also hammer on substance, and substantive issues need a lot of maturity, lot of homework, lot of say engagements, lot of brainstorming, lot of paperwork, lot of say iterations to make progressive iterations. And at the end of the day, we have seen in this process for last 30 years, we have made a lot of advancement, a lot of milestones, but we failed on some point. We couldn't deliver that much faster. True, but we delivered. The process delivered. UNFCCC process also say delivered, not only in terms of mitigation, in terms of adaptation, in terms of climate finance. Now we are also trying to have loss and damage. Vincent, bye.
Yeah, thanks, Quamrul.
Now again, you take.
Yeah, no, you were asking about loss and damage. Yes, I agree with Franz. The next 2 years for this loss and damage dialogue is going to be an important learning exercise for all of us in terms of identifying what needs to be done, how will we do it, how much is needed, who should be the primary actors, and what would be the principles that would be underlying that kind of loss and damage discussion, including the need to provide support. And I do see that as a positive step because what Glasgow has done was really to put loss and damage as a key part of the conversation over the next few years. So that includes the work on the Santiago network, that includes this dialogue, and that includes identifying exactly how the principles of the convention and the Paris Agreement, so including the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, could be reflected as part of that discussion. But going beyond loss and damage, I think one of the things that also I would like to maybe reflect on a bit as well is in the Glasgow Climate Pact, you know, this encouragement there for parties to consider updating and revisiting their NDCs next year. And then after that, there would be an annual high-level event to sort of like review those NDCs. And I think the understanding is that we would then essentially look at seeing if we can update the NDCs annually. One of the things that also got me wondering is, and this was triggered by Franz's comment, you know, about honesty in terms of what countries put forward as pledges in the regime. If, for example, there is pressure on developing countries, for example, and of course on developed countries to continually update and revisit their NDCs every year, there might be a situation where we get to a point where countries might just put in updates without really knowing exactly how they're going to achieve it over the next few years. And so I think that really is something that perhaps we all might really think about as well, because then again, the question of, you know, how do we make sure that the regime that we are in, the process, builds trust. And so if we are able to, if the requirement of Glasgow is for developing countries, for example, to put in NDC updates or revisit their NDCs every year and see if you can update it every year, is taken to heart. And then when we do the biennial transparency reports, and it shows that developing countries are not able to achieve the NDCs that they put forward, then I think that might show us that there could be some implementation challenges that will then need to be addressed. And so this needs to be linked back to the issue of support, right, for NDC implementation, whether it's on mitigation or adaptation, that links it back to the very idea of how often do you actually ask countries to update their NDCs. We know that in the Paris Agreement, countries can update their NDCs, in fact, anytime, whenever they want. But perhaps there might also be a certain need to calibrate the pressure for updating NDCs to the extent that we are also able to respect the national requirements of countries to not keep on changing, policies too much, too often, because that might actually result in policy failure rather than policy implementation at the end. So I just wanted to throw that into this conversation because it was something that I was trying to reflect on when leaving Glasgow. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice, for your very crystal clear reflection on the outcome of Glasgow and also on our way forward. So hopefully next week we are also going to discuss at length what is the way forward, how we can approach our homeworks, because we have a lot of homeworks. So hopefully from next week we would like to have that in our conversation. Now I would like to ask Tony. You are a solution man on the ground. So how you try to translate the outcome of COP26 onto the ground, take it onto the ground, especially adaptation do require a lot of actions taking onto the ground. Because implementation, we have been shying away for many months.
Well, it's a bit difficult for me because I wasn't actually I wasn't allowed into the blue zone. And so the solution...
You are in the green zone. So no. Green zone is solution, huh?
Yeah, yes, but I didn't get into the green
solution. So how do you take those actions onto the ground?
Well, again, through this project, the Climate Crisis Team project, and the toolkit that I'm building, I thought, what's the most effective way of making things happen to speed up the absorption of carbon dioxide? And like I said, the most efficient and cost-effective way is to absorb it into industrial hemp and then process that and enrich the soil, make the soil better for people to grow food with. So it can be used to absorb carbon dioxide in vast amounts. I'm talking to someone later today who has a collection of growers in America, and they will be able to, that's on. They will be able to, one crop, it will absorb 2.91 million tons of carbon dioxide in one crop. It's huge. It's just like everybody should be growing it everywhere as much as possible and locking that carbon back up, So, and it can be used for so many things that it can lift the lives of millions of people because you can make so many things out of it. And it's, the trade opportunities are enormous. The replacement of a lot of plastics and so on. I think it's the single most effective way to redress the balance in the atmosphere and to solve so many other problems as well. You are the negotiator for 46 of the least developed countries, and I think is it 30 something of those are in Africa. I'm not sure, but if one of the big tasks will be to get the many African governments to change the laws to allow the growing and processing of industrial hemp, right? But when they see the opportunities that are there to improve their GDP, to lift the lives of millions of their citizens, to eradicate food insecurity, and I'm talking about within 10 years of doing that in almost all of Africa, then there is no downside to it, apart from not doing anything, and then they're on a fast track on the road that we're on right now, which is to climate disaster. So that's what I'm doing about it. And as one person, I'm building this system myself. I have 25 years experience of web and information management services, so I know a little bit. I have a developer in India who's helping me. I have the blessing of my company, but I'm doing it off my own bat at the moment. But there are so many people that are coming forward, investors, growers, seed producers. It's just like crazy. The meeting I have after this is with these people in America, and one of them has just got 500 million euros secured for EU carbon credits for investment in carbon char programs, and the other person is the one with the 400,000 acres of area to grow hemp on.
Oh, thank you very much, Tony. Cathy.
Yeah, and I guess you probably noticed that I was laughing when you mentioned the definition for climate finance. And I mean, personally, I'd love to see such a definition, and also it just reminded me at COP26 when this was brought up, and I hope, of course, there will be such a definition, and also people will stop arguing. And also, of course, that the $100 billion delivery plan was a bit of a disappointment for civil society stakeholders, and adaptation is certainly not 50% yet. And also that, as some of you may know, that Yango and Angle, so the Climate Action Network, have written a joint letter on calling for loss and damage finance. So of course, we would love to see more support towards loss and damage as well. And also, as Franz said, that we made some progress on gender, but I think there's certainly lots of work ahead as well, especially the Gender Action Plan's midterm review is coming up next year. And also another challenge is that we still see some parties, namely one party, who doesn't seem to like the idea of having gender mentioned in some paragraphs. It happened in many rooms. I've heard in Transparency, Article 6, and I witnessed it myself, unfortunately, in technology. So certainly hope that that parties will also raise, well, specifically one party will also raise their attention on gender mainstreaming as well.
What about education? Cathy, what about education?
Yeah, I think ACE had such a great progress this year. There's the Glasgow work program now, and also highlighted youth several times, and also the ACE Youth Forum will happen annually from this year, and already the second edition already took place earlier this year. So I think that's a great success as well for youth and also for other aspects. Yeah.
Thank you. Vice, what is your final message for this conversation?
Oh, final message.
Yeah.
Final message. We all have a lot of work to do on everywhere in the world. We know that the situation is urgent. We know that we need to do much more on reducing emissions at the same time as we need to do much more in our home countries on adaptation and on addressing loss and damage. And we know that we need to do that on the basis of evidence and science. And so we need to do a lot more on all of these things. While also listening to all of us, especially to the youth, because they are the ones who are going to be living in the world that we'll be leaving behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice, for your message. Ambassador Franz Perrez, your last word.
Thanks. I hope it will not be my last words, and we have other discussions here in other settings, but and even the Last Supper. But I would agree with Genta. Yes, one of the key outcomes is not only that we have adopted good decisions, but there's still a lot that remains to be done. And I think what is also one of the key outcomes is that we have also to make sure that we do not hide ourselves behind cliches or ideologies or traditional thinking. Just building on what Vincent was saying about increase NDCs and then the challenges to deliver on them, I think we have also to be very honest. I think there's a big difference between the poorest countries of the world and on the other side, the G20 members. And we cannot expect and should not expect the same from the poorest countries as we do from the G20 members. The G20 members are responsible for more of the 80% of the global emissions. And most of the G20 members clearly do have the capacity to do more. I think we should not shy away from that. I think if you are able to send satellites in outer space, then you also have the capacity to reduce your emissions. That is not an issue of capacity, that is an issue of priority setting. And we should really make sure that we do not provide a frame that allows certain members of the G20 to hide behind their status as developing countries not to do more. So I think we all have to do more, and especially those have to do more who have the capacity to do more, like Switzerland, and those who have the capacity and are also part of the biggest polluters, biggest responsible of the problems, like the G20 members. So let us focus together that these two groups are doing more, that at the end, everybody can do more, also those who need our support. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Franz Perrez, Vice, Tony, Cathy, for your great takes, reflections, and hopefully, all that, of course, we can plan, and then we can move fast to reach the ultimate objective of our very dear convention, which we have crafted in 1991. So with that, I would now like to end this episode with a positive note that we have a hope. We didn't test that in Glasgow. So move fast, move forward, and catch that train to Sharm el-Sheikh, to Dubai. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Quamrul.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Truth unites. Truth gives a chance to live. Join us. Global crisis. Time for the truth.